Good morning, everyone, and for our followers and audience in the US and other part of the world, good evening. Welcome to another episode of Wealth in Society Live. And today we are very happy to be speaking with Paula Hunter, the Executive Director of Mojaloop Foundation, which mission is to bring financial inclusion to the world by bringing interoperability, digital payment infrastructure together. And what brings Paula to the program this evening is the announcement of the collaboration between Mojaloop Foundation and the Monetary Authority of Singapore, which brings some experience in policy development as well as some of the work that they've done in foundational digital infrastructure to the table. And Good evening, Paula. It's a pleasure to have you on the program.
Happy to be here.
And
Thank you.
And we were saying the Mojaloop Foundation is not unfamiliar to Wealth in Society. We had the chair of the foundation, Costa Perry, on our program late last year, and he was talking about some of the things that in his role as a deputy director of the financial services for the poor program, and he talked about Mojaloop as well. Today, we want to delve deeper into what you do. We understand is your mission to bring financial inclusion through digital payment infrastructure, specifically the Mojaloop software. Tell us a bit more about what you do at Mojaloop in terms of bringing that interoperability to the community that you serve in different parts of the world. We understand you're particularly active in Africa, in parts of Asia, India, Bangladesh, etc. Right, and the main assets that you bring is the Mojaloop software. How else are you involved in creating the infrastructure for digital payments? Are you also providing philanthropic grants or contribution, financial assistance, or is just technical assets and assistance?
Okay, so let me just kind of give a little background on the Mojaloop Foundation. As you noted, we were spun out of the FSG group of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. They had a vision for addressing financial inclusion, and part of that vision included creating a software platform that would increase interoperability and reduce the costs associated with deploying a payments platform. And so several years ago, they created this Mojaloop open source platform, and it's been evolving over the last few years. In May of 2020, we launched the Mojaloop Foundation as an independent open source software foundation whose primary focus and mission, of course, is on financial inclusion, but also our center of gravity as far as our work is on enhancing the software base so that central banks and other financial service providers can deploy real-time digital payment platforms that take advantage of no licensing costs, but also a lower cost to deploy and implement the solution. And so to your question about grants and funding and such, our investment is in the development of the platform, the development and nurturing of a community of individuals that are helping us define the requirements and the roadmap for our development efforts so that we can invest in making sure that the Mojaloop platform is sound and stable for folks to deploy, and then the market can take advantage of that and deploy it with central banks, other institutions and such. But we stop at the development and education with regard to the platform. In the spirit of open source, what we're trying to do is generate a public good that anyone can avail themselves of, that there are no licensing costs associated with it. There is a robust community that's maintaining, enhancing the code base. And so that's really where our funds are going. And in fact, we accept funding from various philanthropic organizations like the Gates Foundation, Rockefeller Foundation. We also get funding from member companies like Google, Coil, Modusbox, Ripple, and others that have alignment from a technology and a mission standpoint. But at that point, the software is available to the market to use as they see fit. And we welcome central banks to use and deploy the technology, but we actually do not fund deployments of the Mojaloop platform.
How much do you get involved in the deployment itself in terms of integrating it into the platform of the host community that you serve? Is it just the software? You're free to use it, and that's basically it. Do you get involved in bringing the community together and setting up the platform itself in the host countries?
It's essential that we are very active with the community. The community is not only software developers, it's systems integrators, software vendors, service providers, all that are interested in deploying or implementing or supporting Mojaloop-based deployments. And so what we want to make sure is that community is communicating with one another about requirements, feature enhancements, other things that they want to add to the platform, and that they collaborate on supporting one another. We also invest in training. So we've rolled out a very robust training program that is free of charge. Again, our mission being a public good, everything we do is free of charge. So we want to make sure that there is a very robust ecosystem that's trained and willing and able to deploy Mojaloop. We also meet 4 times a year. Up until recently, we used to meet face to face, but as you can imagine, that has not been a possibility. But we still meet 4 times a year, open to all, and it's to focus on what have we accomplished in the last 3 or 4 months with regard to the platform. What are the priorities we need to focus on in the next 3 to 4 months? What's the input from the marketplace, from the central banks, et cetera? So we iterate every 3 to 4 months on the development roadmap because we want to be very agile. We want to have rapid improvement to the software base, and it's important to have that inclusion across the ecosystem because everyone brings a different perspective. A systems integrator, a central bank, a digital financial service provider, a mobile network operator, they all have their own perspective and constituents that they have to serve. We welcome them all. And I'm happy to report that we have, I would say at last count, at least 45 countries that are contributing to our projects, 6 continents.
The joint venture between
correct
network operator Orange and MTN, and from the days of when you were still part of the financial services program, there are programs in India with Phonepe, right, or Phonepe, and in Bangladesh and other regions.
Well, yes, as you mentioned, those 2 deployments, Tanzania and Mowali, are well underway. I can't speak to their public releases. That's up to them. Right. Although Mowali has gone live and is active, Tanzania is still in process. Our community is actively engaged with a number of other central banks and countries where Mojaloop will be part of their payment strategy. But I can't speak on behalf of those integrators. Our objective is really to reach those countries that can take advantage of a new platform, a new reference design, and may not have real-time payments today. So this allows them to jumpstart their work and move more quickly in getting a new platform installed. But as you can imagine, implementing and testing and scaling up a payments platform is not something you do quickly. You have to do carefully and with great care to ensure that things are tested, that you pilot things, that you roll it out in phases, that if it's a central bank, you make sure that your financial service partners are trained and well prepared to onboard their customers. It's a long process, but we're optimistic. As you mentioned, we have the two that you already noted, Tanzania and Mowali, but we have several others in the queue that should be becoming more public soon. And because we're so keenly interested in interoperability, the more that come online, the more it reinforces the benefits of this interoperable platform.
Right.
Instead of someone having to choose one service provider or be locked into a service provider, being able to plug into a financial network is really important in providing people access and also lower transaction costs.
Under what condition is it most ideal? What are the prerequisites for some of these areas or countries where implementing Mojaloop will be more suitable? Do you have a real-time retail payment system already in place?
No, in fact, I would say the most critical element is a strategic vision for digital payments and financial inclusion for their country. And the entities that we're talking to and engaging with you consistently have a vision, a strategy, and it may not be we want to solve this in the next 12 months. It might be want to solve it in the next 5 years. But in many cases, they may not currently have a real-time payments platform. They aspire to get to that. In other cases, they might have a real-time payment platform that is inadequate. But what I see consistently amongst the different entities that we talk to across various countries in Asia and Africa in particular is a strategic vision to lift people out of this unbanked world and get them involved. And even in some cases, they might be underbanked, but getting them more actively engaged in a state-of-the-art financial platform rather than languishing behind systems that are not in place.
With the announcement of the collaboration with MAS, it's the first central bank that is a sponsor member of the foundation. Tell us in terms of what is the role of a sponsor member? What are its duties and responsibilities and obligations as well? I mean, do they provide funding, or is just technology? Or advice is in policy development in the case of MES?
Yes, a sponsor member of the Mojaloop Foundation is a very strategic position. And with that commitment comes the responsibility to contribute to our mission and growth and the evolution of our platform. And so what the Monetary Authority of Singapore has done is already committed resources, of course, Sapnendu as an advisor to our board, Alan Lim as a delegate in our technical governing board. Their insight and perspective from a regulator perspective is very important, but also they're known as an innovator. And, of course, Singapore is not a country that has a large proportion of underserved citizens, but they recognize their position in the world to advance financial inclusion in developing countries. So that strategic vision is in line with our mission. And as we get to know one another, we've been talking for some months now. Obviously already have placed them into our sponsor level to provide that strategic counsel. The next stage is to flesh out what projects we want to collaborate on. So we're currently discussing, particularly in the area of where they're very strong is central bank digital currencies. We're very interested in their perspective on that and how we can leverage Mojaloop to deliver more capabilities in that area. So we're not yet to ready to announce a specific project, but certainly those are the areas where we think we have the best synergy.
I was going to ask, are there any projects that there's in the pipeline with MES and the area of work that they are involved in? For example, they've done some research or paper around foundational infrastructure with the Central Bank of Kenya and Ghana in Africa, and also in Asia with Brunei and Cambodia. Now, do they sit in the board of directors as well? How are they influencing the work and the direction of the foundation?
They are absolutely influencing the work and the direction of the Mojaloop Foundation. Because they are a government entity, it's sometimes a little challenging for a government entity to take on a voting position, a board of directors. So they're a board advisor, and we will regularly consult with Sapnendu on strategic direction for the Mojaloop Foundation. And then more specifically, Alan Lim is on our technical governing board, which really oversees our long-range product roadmap. It's again, a strategic position to help guide us on what we need to be thinking about 6 months, 12 months, 18 months out. So it's not about the day-to-day activities of the development community. It's more what path do we want to take with our roadmap, with the architecture, and how we want to enhance and advance the Mojaloop open source project. Their expertise and perspective is really helpful. Maybe 3 months from now, I might come back to you and talk about a more specific project, but right now it's strategic discussions. You know, Alan joined our technical governing board meeting this morning, you know, where we talk about, again, architectural issues, our product roadmap, and he's already an active contributor there. We also are collaborating on some upcoming hackathons that Mass is going to be hosting this summer. So our team is already involved in that. And I'm sure there'll be other specifics as we advance the relationship.
In terms of the technology itself, how complementary is what MES is working on compared to what is already existing or inherent in Mojaloop? So Project Ubin, for example, right? It is built on the Quorum protocol, whereas the Mojaloop is based on Interledger. Okay. But interoperability is the name of the game, right?
Absolutely, that's key. That's key. As I said, we've been talking to Mas for several months now. Alan and his team has had the opportunity to have several discussions with our technical governing board, our community, and we do feel that there's alignment on the technologies, ways to enhance interoperability, but also to extend the Mojaloop platform to address some of the interests that Mas has.
Interledger protocol itself is not, it is kind of interoperable with blockchain. And when we had our interview with Costa earlier on, the foundation of Mojaloop was still tentative in terms of looking at central bank digital currency. Tell us in terms of where do you think central bank digital currency is heading, and what kind of potential do you see its application for financial inclusion, interoperability, especially in the retail application of the digital currency? Ubin is kind of more focused on the wholesale application between financial institutions, right? And kind of limited application for last mile, deployment to the end users, so to speak.
Right, and I think like Project Ubin, right now our primary focus is wholesale. Our discussions about CBDC are wholesale,
right?
Because let's face it, the plumbing needs to be in place before you can take the drink of water. So what we need to do is make sure that on the back end, within a country, across border, multi-currency, we flesh out the details for settlement and interchange between the different currencies. At a wholesale level, I think retail comes later. We really need to make sure that the underpinnings are sound, well-tested, proven, and ready to launch before we go retail.
In terms of financial inclusion, serving the unbanked and serving the poor, one would assume that the retail application is kind of more direct, more relevant. Tell us in terms of you're moving towards wholesale, you're also moving towards cross-border. And one kind of figure the need for cross-border kind of payments for the poor.
particularly in the times of COVID, where you have families that are distributed across borders, you have migrant workers, you have expatriates. There's a real need right now to address the cross-border exchanges. Historically, it's been very expensive to transfer money across border, and if you are a worker that wants to send money home, even if the border is only 20 miles or 20 kilometers from your home country, the minute you cross over, the transaction costs become even more burdensome. So the more we can reduce those transaction costs and make it more seamless and interoperable, then it brings more parties into the loop and that can exchange currencies. We don't want to be a monolith. We don't want one currency. We don't want one payment platform. We want interoperability. And we think that interoperability will reduce costs for everyone.
In terms of the challenges of bringing financial services for the poor, one of the issues, challenges is in terms of infrastructure and policies, right? Central banks policies in terms of who provide the service, and a lot of the time, the provision of payments is not seen as a utility; it's seen as a service that commercial organization provide for profits, and to have central banks involvement in your mission, how much would that address policies, infrastructure issues in your perspective?
Well,
they create an environment where you have the unbanked.
It's critical to have the central banks engaged, particularly in countries where central bank policy has such an impact on the regulatory affairs of the various financial institutions. So having them in place, what you don't want to do is have a commercial entity trying to roll out and run afoul of regulatory matters. So we want to make sure that all parties are at the table talking about the platform, the rules, the rails for how we deploy a Mojaloop-based platform. The other thing is there is room for commercial players in this. We fully expect that. Mowali is an excellent example. It's a joint venture between Orange and MTN to bring new financial services out to their customers. What we hope is by delivering an open source platform with no licensing fees, with community maintenance enhancement, it reduces the overall cost of deployment, maintaining that platform, and therefore that can be delivered at a lower cost, and therefore lower transaction costs to the end consumer. So that's part of the reason we chose this open source strategy is even if you are a commercial player, you can leverage the platform and not have to pass hard costs off to the customers.
And what's the attitude towards interoperability? You cited an example of Mowali in markets where it's still emerging, in kind of more established market where you have maybe more dominant players, the incumbents players, the commercial banks that serve the majority of the bank customers, but not so much the unbanked one. What's the attitude towards interoperability? Obviously, it serves the need for smaller emerging players, but from the incumbent players, are you also getting the same kind of response? And what role does regulator have to play in terms of bringing the two together?
Yeah, so I've been in the open source and standard space for more years than I like to admit. And interoperability at times can be threatening to people that want to take a more proprietary approach to something. But look at Wi-Fi, look at Bluetooth. At one point, I can remember when there were arguments about Bluetooth and Wi-Fi amongst the major manufacturers that did not want to play nicely with one another. But at some point, there's a tipping point where they recognize my laptop and my phones are not differentiated by this base infrastructure that I offer as part of the package. So why am I investing in a proprietary solution when we can come together as a community, address these non-differentiating items, and differentiate where we add value. We're early in that with Mojaloop because there's, obviously there are proprietary players out there selling hubs and switches. But at some point, as the market evolves, there's a recognition that there are certain fundamental offerings and solutions that are universal. They don't differentiate you. They're a checkbox. You have to have them. It's a level playing field. So interoperability, in my mind, is about agreeing on what everyone needs and what's the common denominator across competitors, and then let them differentiate it above that line.
Among the members or the part of the ecosystem partners that you work with, some are pretty dominant. You mentioned Google, and MasterCard, for example. It is about interoperability and it's about open source as well. But to be truly operating on a level playing field, the foundation doesn't give them additional competitive advantages over those that are not in the foundation.
Well, we do not want to infer competitive advantages as being part of the foundation. When someone joins the foundation, what they're basically saying is, I support the mission. I want this mission to prevail. I want the project to be healthy and vibrant, and I'm willing to invest to ensure that it does. Now, in some cases, there are other parties that are active in our community that have not stepped up yet to be members. We hope to bring them on board and ask them to pay their fair share. But our fundamental premise is everything that we do is open. Our roadmap is open, our work stream activities are open. The meetings that we have 4 times a year are open and free to the public. So we welcome all bodies to participate with us in whatever form is best for them. Some companies have chosen to make monetary or developer investments in the Mojaloop project for either mission alignment or even for strategic commercial interests. We're happy to take their contributions, but we're very transparent with how we make decisions about the product roadmap, how we make sure that we adhere to the mission. That's why we've formed as a nonprofit foundation with bylaws and a board of directors and a technical governing board to make sure that no one party has extraordinary influence over our decisions.
Part of the what was in the announcement with MAS, it also provide new opportunities for the fintech ecosystem in Singapore and Asia Pacific. How do you see that developing and creating the opportunities for fintech in that region?
It's a vibrant marketplace for fintechs, and we think that there's opportunity for them to engage not only in our development work, but in deployment of Mojaloop within and beyond Singapore. So again, I think it's preliminary to get specific, but we want to leverage the fact that MAS is noted as an innovator. They attract, very prestigious talent and corporations that are interested in advancing financial inclusion. And over the next few months, I think we'll be able to formulate a specific project plan that takes advantage of that. But certainly having that center of gravity is useful in expanding our footprint. Up until recently, I think our center of gravity has been Africa. And while I'm not saying that we're shifting away from that, that's not the case. But there are many markets within Asia that have equal need for Mojaloop and Mojaloop platforms. So we want to take advantage of MAS's interest and relationships and expertise to leverage that.
You're already working with MAS in terms of doing some of the hackathon on their platform.
Yes, my team's already involved, and we're going to be very active in the hackathon that's coming up this summer.
Are this region specific, or they are kind of global in nature? Are you
global.
kind of creating
Absolutely
use
global.
cases? Are you looking at global challenges and how some of this fintechs can help to solve them? And are you using also other part of their tools like their sandboxes and so on and so forth?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. The planning's well underway and my team has been meeting with Mass regularly. One of the things that we've experienced in the last, 16 months is that we have gone truly global. Up until, COVID struck, we were on the ground in Africa quite regularly. We have sadly not been able to meet our colleagues and community members in Africa. But what we have found is that our quarterly meetings now have much more robust representation. It was, sometimes prohibitive for people to travel to Africa to join our face-to-face meetings. By doing virtual events, it's really broadened the participation globally. And so what the challenge will be next year is how do we integrate virtual and face-to-face meetings? Because God knows, I think many of us really want to meet face-to-face again.
Yes.
But we also want to take advantage of what we've learned from reaching out to a broader community during these virtual days.
As part of the interoperability agenda, I mean, digital identity and payments identity standards are very important as well. How are you progressing in that sense? There are a number of identity standards out there, and one of your members, Reaper, is kind of also heading a global payments identity kind of project. How is that progressing? Are they leaning towards specific standards?
Yeah. So right now, identity is not a core focus of the Mojaloop platform, but what we need to do, make sure is that we are open and have the APIs in place that address the needs of the marketplace. And the identity market, particularly in the last 12 months, has exploded with new projects and new initiatives and rollouts. So we're monitoring them and trying to make sure that we can accommodate them, but it's not a core focus at this time.
In terms of being digital, especially in terms of providing direct government benefits and all, there are also instances where the last mile delivery kind of becomes susceptible to fraud, right? To identity theft and use of corruption practices. And so there are very specific, very technical issues. But how are you looking at those?
Government payments, benefit payments, is something that has really changed and become a very hot issue in the last 16 months. And while we don't actually deal with the retail transactions, if you will, from Mojaloop, where, as I said, we're the plumbing. What we want to make sure is that people can plug into identity frameworks that are compatible with the back end of the payment solution. We've been talking to other providers and parties that are focused on digital payments. And in a couple of the cases where we're talking to central banks that want to implement G2P payments, we want to make sure that our platform is compatible with whatever they want to plug in. But that's a whole nother set of challenges and interoperability challenges that there are other organizations that are taking the lead on. We want to be compatible, but we aren't taking the lead on ID at this time.
So your role is in terms of the planning, the infrastructure, the rails, not so much the policy. In terms of how do you measure impact, we understand from Costa in the previous conversation is, how many people you get connected out of that 1.7 billion, how many people are using digital payments, and and also that there's a gender equality part of it. Is that also carried into Mojaloop in terms of inclusion of financial services for women?
Yeah, absolutely. Women can have such an impact on an economy if they become empowered and engaged in the financial community. So we do believe that by addressing the financial inclusion, in particular, women will benefit from that. It's one of those challenges that you have to be patient with, because if you look at the trajectory of implementing a Mojaloop platform, having a central bank roll it out, integrate it with their financial service providers in a country, roll it out to their citizens, it's a long tail before you see metrics. Yes, of course, I want to see how many people are now impacted by Mojaloop, but it's going to be a little while. I have to be patient. Our priority right now is getting more and more deployments live. particularly with central banks, and those will flow into impact. But yeah, it requires patience.
It is still very early days.
Yes,
As an
yes,
independent foundation, you mentioned just in the second quarter of last year.
right, right.
Have you celebrated your anniversary yet?
We
Or
did
just come?
virtually, but yeah, I have to say I'm very much missing my community. I was fortunate enough to attend, I think, 5 face-to-face meetings before we launched,
Mm,
and unfortunately we had to go virtual. But we have some really great players. I've also hired staff in the last year that I have not met. I would like to meet them face to face. We joke, I don't know how tall they are,
okay.
but they fill big shoes and they're doing a great job. So I just look forward to getting on a plane and seeing my community around the world, just reinvigorating our work face to face when it's possible. We face challenges everywhere.
How big is the organization, the foundation, in terms of staff, in terms of your headquarters in Wakefield, Massachusetts?
Yeah.
Do you have offices around the globe? You're very active in Africa, obviously.
So we have a small staff in Wakefield, which is our headquarters. That's really where the bills are paid
Mm,
and the website's maintained and things like that. So the stuff that you would expect in a back office operation, and our marketing and PR team. I have a community manager in Kenya. I have a product strategy director in the UK, and I'll be likely adding more key people. But what's really important with an open source foundation is the community.
mm,
And that's what amplifies our work. We don't want to burden our operating structure with a lot of staff. We need volunteer community members developing the code, maintaining code, enhancing the code. And so those hundreds of people that touch our code base in the community are really the count that matters for us, because they are going to make the most measurable impact. Not to diminish the work of my staff by any means, but
mm.
but we all, everyone on my team is very, very much engaged with the community on a daily basis. They bring domain expertise, they bring geographic and demographic expertise, payments expertise, central bank. So to borrow a phrase, it takes a village to make this happen.
This is just the start of our conversation. I'm sure as you have got more of your projects, firmed up and ready to announce, we will have our next conversation. So for now, thank you so much, Paula, for speaking to us and giving us an update on what the foundation is doing.
It was my pleasure. Thanks for having me.